Now that our elevation's drawn, it's time to add some dimensions and callouts. So with the ID template that I have created, dimensions are simple and easy to use. I have created dimension styles that work exactly like the text styles. Simply choose a dimension style that matches the viewport that your drawings are going to be scaled to. So in this instance, our elevations are going to be scaled at 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. So I'm going to go to the Annotate tab, to the Dimensions panel, and then it's this very first scroll bar that you see. If you click on that, you'll see all of the dimension styles listed here. So because our viewport is going to be scaled at 1/4, I'm choosing 1/4 to use. So all of the text in these styles have been modified to the correct size, and all you have to worry about is just matching dimension style to your viewport scale. So let me show you an elevation that already has dimensions completed. As you can see, there's dimensions everywhere, so a good guideline is to have multiple sets of dimensions. The dimensions closest to the line work are what I call detail dimensions, and they're measuring objects as they are lined up in the elevation, so they're kind of like a running total. I call the dimensions furthest from the line work the overall dimensions. They are designed to help you understand the overall length of the elevation or even parts of the elevation. Now, one set of dimensions I'm not showing are the mid dimensions, which can be aligned between the detail dimensions and the overall dimensions. They measure the overall lengths of object groups. So for instance, I could have measured the length of the cabinets as a whole instead of as individual cabinets. And so then it's basically adding up 3 foot, 3'6", 2'6", and 2 foot, so that the installer can understand what the running total for the cabinets is. For the most part, I just stick with detail dimensions and overall dimensions. You'll also notice that there are dimensions located on all 4 sides of this elevation, and the reason why is because there's different things to measure on all 4 sides. So I always start with the cabinets on the base, and I do the detail dimensions, and then I do the overall, and then I go to the right side and I dimension that. Then I take a look at what's happening up on top and on the left. If what's happening on the bottom is the same as what's happening on top, then I don't add dimensions. But here we have wall cabinets in different places, and they don't align with the cabinets below. So that's why I decided to go ahead and dimension the upper cabinets. Super important for an installer to understand. Same thing with the left side. If it differentiates at all from the right side, then I add measurements, and the only thing that differentiated was the cabinet height. So the desk is a little bit lower than the counter height of the cabinets, and so that's why I only added 1 dimension. These dimensions are the exact same on this side. That's why I didn't have to add dimensions for the upper cabinets on the left-hand side. Alright, so enough of this boring stuff. Let's get into how to place dimensions. So I'm going to come back over here, and we're going to start with the very bottom. So with 1/4 selected, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Home tab, and I'm going to make sure that I have the correct layer, which in my template is called A-dim. So A-dim for A dimensions. Then I'm going to go back to the Annotate tab, make sure that 1/4 is selected, and then I'm going to choose Dimension. So what you need to understand about the Dimension command is that it takes 3 clicks to complete. The first click starts the dimension, so I'm going to choose this corner right here, and you'll see how the dimension attaches to my cursor. No matter where I go, it's measuring and it's trying to place the second side. So I'm going to come over here and click here. So it's 5.5 feet. Oh, actually it should be 5 foot. You got to watch that little filler that we added. Right there, perfect. So I click the second time. The third click is going to place the dimension. So there's a little rule to this. So you don't want to go so far that the arms of the dimension are super long, but you also don't want to go so close that you can't even see the arms. So we're looking for a happy medium. So something kind of like right here. That's what you're going for. If you want to, you can always measure out how far you want to go, draw a line across the bottom, and then align your dimensions that way. And that way you can also know the distance that you have so that you can be the same on the sides of the elevation as well. But I've been doing CAD for so long that I've just learned how to place it correctly, and then I just kind of go with the flow. Totally up to you what you decide that you want to do. Alright, so let's try that again. What's nice about the dimension command is that it keeps going until you hit escape. So, I am not going to worry about the filler. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call out the size of that filler. So I'm actually going to come here and measure the cabinet. So it's really important to help installers understand that the cabinet is a whole number. So it shouldn't be 3.5 feet. It should be 3 feet. Now to place this dimension so that it aligns with the previous dimension, I always hover my mouse over that previous dimension, and you see how it gets that little triangle that says midpoint. Then I can just click and my dimension will place. So first click, second click, and then go back to the original dimension right next to it and find how it intersects, and then just click that. That's how you can get super aligned dimensions every single time. Now, what's interesting about what happened here is that I did not bring this line down, and I actually probably should have. So remember that each cabinet needs to go all the way to the floor. So it should look like this. Then I take the dimension and I click and I click, and here it is. And we'll do the last one. We will definitely show how thick or how deep the side cabinets are, just so that an installer understands what's happening right there. So now we have just put in the detail dimensions straight across. The only thing that we did not dimension was this. And the reason why is because a 1/2 inch, it's so small. It's easier to call out small things than it is to dimension small things. So we're going to get to call outs here in a second. The last thing I want to do is to do the overall running dimension. So from this point to this point, and then bring it under. And the same thing happens. You don't want it too far, you don't want it too close, you got to put it just right. So it could be the same length between the line work and your detail dimensions, or it can be a little bit smaller. I think as long as you're making it readable and you're not too far and you're not too close, I think you're fine. Now the one thing I want to point out with dimensions is you notice that there's a space between the dimension arms and the line work itself. We always want to create a space, and the reason why is because when this prints black and white, it can be really hard to differentiate between what the line work is of your elevation and your dimensions. So we don't want to confuse anybody who's trying to install, like any contractor or cabinet installer, with trying to figure out what's line work and what's dimension. So always make sure there's a nice space between your dimensions and your line work. And with the way that I have designed the ID template, I have definitely accommodated for that space. And again, I'll show you at the end of the video, if you don't have the ID template, how to do this. Alright, so I'm going to go to the right side. I always try to dimension at least on the bottom and the right. So this time we're trying to describe heights. So I'm going to take the dimension, we're still on 1/4, a dim layer, and I'm going to start with the soffit, and again, not too far, not too close. We need to see a little bit of an arm, something about right there. Click, click, place. Whoa, click. And so here I want to go to the countertop height. I don't want to go to the backsplash. And you can see that there isn't a line for me to snap to. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to hover and get that extension to show up. There we go. Just like that. You might have to go super slow. But as soon as I get that, now I have that. And now I'm going to place it by aligning it to the top one. It's going to be the same thing. Hover. And again, it might take a little time, and you might need to get really close for it to actually activate. Nope, it's not working. So when that happens, just draw a temporary line to help you place that dimension. Annotate dimension. And now we can go all the way to the bottom. We don't need to get super detailed because what we can do again is we're going to call out the distance of your backsplash, the distance of your toe kick. They're smaller, so we can actually call them out a little bit easier than we can dimensioning them. So we just got the basic general overall information. That's looking good, and the last thing to do is to put the overall. And again, not too far, not too close. We're looking for a good balance. All right, so my next job is going to be to compare what's happening on the bottom with what's happening on the top. So obviously our cabinetry, the only place it aligns is right here. So we need to update the dimensions so that the installer knows which cabinet is which and where they go. So this is going to be interesting as well. So I'm going to show you how I do this because there's a soffit in the way. The last thing I want to do is something like this, where my dimension lines cross into the elevation. That's a big no-no, everybody. Don't do it. We have to create a gap. So I usually place my dimension and then I adjust the arms to come up, and then I can make a better determination of how much arms am I seeing, which that's looking pretty good. So just to demo that one more time, dimension, I'm going to come down here to place the dimension, bring it up to place it up above as a running dimension, and then I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to bring them up so that my dimension arms are not crossing over into the actual elevation. And you can see there's little dots right here. Maybe it's easier to see when I pull out, but that helps you understand like where exactly your dimension is landing on so that you can know where the grips are. So if you need to readjust the elevation, for instance, if you're trying to do something like that, you can. That's what those little grips are for. But again, we don't want to cross the elevation, so I'm lifting them up. Now this next part, you can decide if you want to dimension like the distance between the window and the cabinetry. Now you have to be careful. See how that came through as a diagonal? You got to be kind of careful with these dimensions and make sure that when you're placing them at an angle like this that you just go straight up. Now this is interesting because what it's doing is it's placing the dimensions to the side of the area, and the reason why is because this is too big to fit in this little space. So when that happens, I have to make a determination. Do I want to keep this dimension, or do I want to call this out differently? And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call this out differently. But I do want to show you how to move the text should this happen to you, like on any of the sides. So I think that might happen here. But this is just a really great demonstration. So with the dimension clicked, I'm going to right click and go to Properties. So see how it says General, Miscellaneous, Lines and Arrows? I'm going to go to the one that says Fit, and you have to kind of scroll down a little bit, but here's Fit. And on the very last one it says Text Movement. Click on this little box and you'll see that there's some options. So if I want to move this text from where it's located, I'm going to click Move Text, and I can decide, do I want a leader or do I not want a leader? So I'm going to add a leader. And now you can see that it replaced this particular dimension, and I can place it at an angle if I want to. If you get too close, that little leader goes away. But you can decide like which direction that you want the text to go. So that's how you can get it out of that mode, because previously if I tried to move it, let me get back to where I was, it'll only allow you to go from side to side. It won't let you go. Well, it does go in the middle, but it's not readable in the middle. So to move the text, again, right click on the dimension that's highlighted, find Fit, and in the very last option that you have under Fit, choose Move Text Add Leader or Move Text No Leader. Up to you. But because this is so big and I'm trying to keep things, relatively aligned and looking good, I am actually going to move this guy right here. And then what I want to do is I want to make it so that there's no arms. So I could come over here to lines and arrows, and I could turn off the dimension lines if I wanted to. So not the dimension line, we want to get rid of the extension line. So you can turn the extension line off if you want, or you can just grab these grips and move it onto the tick mark. Either way will work. So that way I don't have lines overlapping lines, because that does show up when you print, and this comes out very well. So there are times when it's okay to dimension inside, but you try to minimize it. I'm doing it here because it's so long and it's kind of a weird dimension that I don't want to screw up like the dimensions that I'm going to have up here. So with this in place, I'm going to close the properties, go to dimension, and I'm just going to measure from cabinet to cabinet. And then of course bring up the dimension line so that we're not crossing, and repeat. Remember that the cabinets should never have 1/2 inch on them. They don't make cabinets with 1/2 inch increments. It's always whole numbers, and it's always on the 3-inch increment. And then the last dimension will be this guy. And yep, see how he's still kind of small and he doesn't really fit inside there, but it's okay to have it off to the side. It indicates that it's associated with this one, and there's no conflict to the right side of this dimension, so I think we're okay. But I do need to bring it up. Always bring it up. No crossing the streams. And I don't need to do an overall dimension because we already have one down here. We don't need to repeat the same information up above. If for some reason this elevation had things going off further than what is showing down here, then yeah, you would put an overall dimension. But don't repeat information. That's rule number 1. Alright, so now I'm going to compare the left side to the right side. Is there anything different? And yes, there is. The desk is shorter than the cabinets. So I'm going to do a dimension line. The top of the countertop to the floor line is different, and so I'm going to drag that out. I kind of want to match the arm length a little bit if I can. Us CAD drafters, we are OCD for sure. So again, if you want to draw a line and then you can measure the distance between here and the line that you draw to help align your dimensions, then you'll know that distance and you can use that distance all the way around. But I'm just kind of an eyeballer, so I get it pretty close. Now I'm not going to dimension the rest of it because it's pretty obvious that these cabinets align over here. So I don't need to repeat any information. Yes, the gap is different between the bottom of the cabinets and the top of the countertop over on the left-hand side. So if I wanted to, I probably could, but it's all going to work out anyway. It's pretty obvious that the cabinets are attaching to the soffit. There's no need to add any unnecessary dimensions. That is how you complete dimensions.